Hey, it's Aaron. Today I have a question that has come from a whole bunch of people in different forms. The question was asked right after, and then between then and now, right after the president stood on the White House lawn and talked about electric vehicles and goals. Specifically, the goal is to have half of all new vehicles sold in the U.S. be electrified by 2030. He said electric powered, and he said sold. Those are two very important things to note. So electric powered could mean hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or fully electric. I'm going to assume that he means plug-ins. So he means plug-in hybrid electrics and fully battery electric vehicles. I don't think he meant just hybrids because we're pretty close to that if you include hybrids in there. We're not like really close, but we're a lot closer than we would be otherwise. So, and most people in their brains don't think of a hybrid as an electric vehicle. So, I think that really what was aiming for, what's being aimed for, are plug-in vehicles. So vehicles that plug in somewhere to charge up, whether that be part-time, like in a PHEV, or full-time in a BEV. So, the goal is semi-realistic. The number one portion of the question that was asked was, is this realistic? The second thing was misnomers on what the president said. Um, it needs to be clarified. The president said it's a goal. He did not mandate it. It's not a requirement. It's a goal. And he had some automakers on board with the goal there to support him, and then several others issued releases that were also supportive. So automakers themselves seem to at least be on board with the PR that is available by going along with this. In the reality, though, there are a lot of things standing in the way of this, and those things have to be addressed. Some of those things are in government, and some of those things are on automakers. And if both of them don't step up and do it, this goal is never going to happen. Now, it needs to be pointed out, the goal is about a 10-year goal. It's 2021 right now. The goal is 2030. That's 9 years. In 9 years, even after re-election, Biden will not be in office. So it becomes the next guy's problem. This is a common theme in government. It's why we have inflation and other things, because it becomes the next dude's problem. The next person that gets elected, it's their issue, not mine anymore. And so a lot of stuff gets, you'll notice in government, a lot of goals are 4, 8, 10, 15 years down the line, because whoever's setting the goal and whoever's talking about it won't have to be there to make sure it comes to fruition. It's no longer their problem. The next guy gets blamed because it didn't happen. So that's a recurring issue here. But anyway, let's talk about the problems. So there are two things that are really big. None of these things, as far as I know, were addressed by the president. Almost none of them are in the infrastructure plan he's proposed. And so I don't see these as being addressed. I think that, which is, again, why I think if something doesn't happen in the next couple of weeks, I feel like this is just a feel-good measure, and it's going to be forgotten about in a year. But the point is, there are a lot of things in the way. I have 7 on my list. I see these as major hurdles to be jumped. So the first couple of them have to do with infrastructure beyond the grid. So this is infrastructure for the physical elements of the vehicles themselves. You got batteries. Right now there's a big bottleneck in batteries, and a lot of the control for those batteries is not ours. A lot of that control is overseas, specifically in China. So that has to be fixed. We have to figure that out. We need to figure out the materials to make them. We need to figure out who's going to make them, where they're going to come from, how they're going to be made, what facilities are going to make them. And this is a big bottleneck. So we need to figure that out. The second thing is metals, specifically rare earth metals. A big bottleneck has happened there. So we're going to have to figure out how to get around that. There are some designs for electric motors that don't require these, and those are possibly the solution. But there are issues with those, just like there are issues with where are we going to get the rare earth metals. Again, China really controls that market. We have to figure that out. That is mostly, both of these things are mostly government problems. These are not problems the automakers need to overcome. These are problems that government needs to figure out. Because in the end, it really comes down to trade. So we're going to have to figure that out. We're going to either have to trade or we're going to have to make some exemptions so that we can start digging for this stuff ourselves. The next thing are mostly consumer issues. So these are issues that are going to affect the sales portion of this goal. So the goal is 50% of sales, which means you have to have buyers for half of those, for all of those vehicles you want to sell. Half the vehicles being sold being electric, you need half the buyers buying electric vehicles. So there's some bottlenecks here, some big issues. These are going to really funnel down and cause problems if they're not addressed. First big one is infrastructure for charging. So I mentioned that before, but it is a big issue. And I'm not talking just about electric vehicle chargers. Those are rolling out pretty well, and they're going to keep rolling out, and we're just going to keep seeing more and more of them. That is actually the easy part. The hard part is supplying power to them. Right now, we have a very aging electrical grid, and it is not being addressed. It needs to be upgraded if we're not going to all become California having brownouts in the middle of the summer, because we just don't have the power to replace gasoline. Half of all cars no longer going to the pump need to be powered, and they're going to require a plug, and they're going to require electricity. So right now, that is a problem. Going along with that problem is my second point, which is home charging units. Most people are unaware that it's very expensive to set up a home charger in your house so that you can charge a car. If you have a plug in your garage, so if you have the correct plug in your garage, you're still going to spend between $300 and about $1,000 or $1,200 to buy a charging unit. Some vehicles come with them, but I don't see that as a long-term thing, because manufacturers, to make these sales numbers, are going to have to bring prices down, and one of the best ways to bring prices down is to start cutting out things that are included. So my unit in my garage, I'm going to do a video on it and fully explain everything involved, but in the end, that was $2,000. I had to have an electrician come out and wire it all up, and I had to buy the charging unit to plug into it. And the total for that was roughly $2,000. Most people are going to be in the same boat. You're going to have to hire an electrician, and you're going to have to buy the charger in order to run an EV. You can plug it into the wall, but that's not a realistic solution. Not for the long term. So that's going to need to be addressed. We're going to have to figure that out. Most consumers do not understand that that is an upfront cost you have with the car, often not included in the loan. The next thing is consumer distrust. We have to address the fact that while most consumers are interested in electric vehicles according to surveys, most don't actually know enough about them to really spend the money to buy them. That shows in sales figures. Right now, electric vehicles, as far as battery electrics, are only about 2% of the market. Plug-in vehicles do far better in terms of sales numbers, and that's purely because it's fully understood. Consumers know, hey, if I forgot to plug it in, it still runs. It has an engine. So, we need to address that issue. And I have to address the issue of the fanboys for electric. I have a lot of names for them, but the point is that these people who are really, really hardcore, adamant electric vehicle enthusiasts, they're not helping other consumers adopt this. They're making it worse because they basically go around all high and mighty, and they talk about why would you, and they go off and try to shame people. And that does not make people like you. It will not make them like the thing you're talking about either. So those people need to kind of back off. You're not helping as far as the PR for electrics go. Now, the fourth point, I think I'm on number, what am I on now? Because I didn't number them here. So sixth point, there you go. So my sixth point is that the vehicles that are being most purchased right now are not the ones seeing electrification. And so I need to point that out. So the majority of electric vehicles right now are either compact or sedans, neither of which are big markets anymore. Compact cars and sedans are basically slowly going the way of the dodo. Uh, Instead, the majority of people are buying pickup trucks. That's the top three sales right there in terms of sales numbers, or pickup trucks. And they are buying mid-size SUVs and small SUVs. So small, I don't mean compact, I mean small. That's the RAV4, Nissan Rogue, that size. So they're not quite compact, but they're pretty close. So they're basically small. Those are the driving vehicle sales in this country. That accounts for most of the vehicles being sold. The majority of the buyers are buying in those segments. Right now, we have no electrification in any of those segments outside of two models I can think of. The Tesla Model X, whose sales are abysmal, and which is a luxury end vehicle according to price. It's not cheap. And a couple of plug-ins also in the luxury market. So outside of a couple of plug-ins that fit this but are not selling well, like the Mitsubishi Outlander, which has a PHEV, there really are no vehicles being sold in these segments. Ford has the Lightning coming out next year. Chevy has said that they will have an electric half-ton pickup truck in the next couple of years. Ram has made no indication, but I assume there's going to be some sort of plug-in or something happening there. So that's the biggest market, pickup trucks, that needs to be addressed. And then it needs to be addressed in such a way that you can get a huge number of those buyers to buy in. So the F-150 Lightning is a great start, but I do not see it taking half of the F-Series sales. I don't see that working out for them. Because they're aiming at a commercial market, which I think is really smart, I think they will sell more than they would have if they just aimed for a consumer market. But again, it's not going to be 50% of overall sales, not even in 10 years. I just don't see that as being realistic. But it's a really good start. Next, we need to address the family vehicles. So mid-size SUVs, small SUVs, and those markets. So those markets are the big one, because I think that is where these automakers, if they're going to make this 50% number, that is where they can really make it happen. They could really make it happen by selling at least 50% of those two segments as electrified. And that's going to take a lot of work, because right now there really isn't much out there as far as plugs go. So that needs to change. Now, the question isn't whether or not the automakers can make it happen, because I think if they really want to, they will. The question is whether or not consumers are going to make it happen, because again, for there to be a sale, there has to be a buyer. And if you don't have a buyer, you're not going to make a sale. And the goal here is 50% of sales. So that brings us to incentives. I don't like the term. I don't like the topic of incentives, because I don't think incentives are a good idea. I think that economically, incentives are a losing game, because you're trying to get people to do something by incentivizing it, and that always is going to have a backfire. Good case in point, the current electric vehicle incentives have become labeled rich people incentives. And that's because the people who can take advantage of them are the people who owe enough on taxes for this incentive to be worthwhile. And that tends to be the upper brackets. That's not, the regular people on the street, the middle management types, the 50K and 60K a year types. That is not, that when your family income is about that, you are not going to have that kind of tax liability. That's just reality. You can argue that all day, but the reality is most people do not pay taxes. Most people get refunds, and the amount that they actually pay is very small in comparison. So the incentives as they are not going to work. So if you're going, and again, you're not going to get rid of that of that negativity. It's rich people, even if you do somehow make it work, and that is because people on the whole do not think financially in years; they think in months. So if your incentive to buy the vehicle is you get a big chunk of money a year from now, most people are not going to buy into that. That to them is not something that circles in their solar system. So it's just not going to happen. What they think of is next month, the month after. So they think in very short terms. Most people financially do not think really long term. That's why 401ks are popular, because you don't have to think. You just you just sign the waiver and let them put some money in it. So what we need to do is, if you're going to have incentives, they need to be at point of sale. They need to be immediate. They need to be right away, which means the incentive cannot be tax-based. It needs to be something else. So my thoughts on that are there are a lot of solutions for that. So if you really think you have to have incentives, there are a lot of solutions for how you can make that happen and make consumers be interested in the incentive. But again, I think if the scale is happening, if the 50% number is really the goal and the production is reaching towards that goal, the prices will shrink anyway. I think the incentive needs to be more on the other end. I think the incentive needs to be on, now you for sure have the infrastructure, you don't need to worry about it. The charging setup is there, you don't need to worry about that. I think incentives for businesses to put in electric car charging stations, as far as like tax breaks and stuff, I think that's a great idea. I think that totally works, especially if you give them a break on things that matter to them. Then yes, that would actually work, because it would just incentivize having more infrastructure. But really, the infrastructure itself needs to happen, and that will be the greatest incentive beyond any kind of, throwing 3,500, 7,500, whatever at people for buying the car. I think you will have more if you do it on the other end, so that they know if they buy the car, they can actually use it. So that's really where we're at here. As far as I can surmise, these 7 things are the most pressing. These are the things that have to be addressed, and that for the most part are not being addressed publicly, that I have seen so far. So President Biden and Congress and the automakers and everybody else really need to be addressing these issues and making sure that that's what's being fixed. And that's it. That's what I got. I think the goal of 2030, with half of all vehicle sales being electric, is doable, but I don't think it's realistic, because these are a lot of things that need to change, and I don't see that there's an incentive for anybody involved to actually make these changes. So there you go. That's what I got. This is Aaron. If you have a question, you can go ahead and ask. I would like to thank all the people that asked this question. A couple of them are my friends. A couple of them are people that just approached me. Giuliano, Mark, and Lisa all asked this question, or variants of it. And then I had probably half a dozen people that are friends of mine that asked the same sort of thing. And it's a very hard question to answer because it's very politicized. So, and again, I know I'm going to have the trolls. I know that the EV people are going to show up and tell me what an idiot I am, or that I'm just standing in the way, or whatever. And that's great, but I'm trying to be realistic here with this. And these are my 7 things that I think need to happen if this is going to be real, if it's really going to happen. So hopefully this helps you. If you have any kind of questions, or you have a follow-up, or you want clarification, hit up the comments down below. You can find me all over the place, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Just make sure to DM or tag me so that I see it. And ask away. If you've got questions and you want to know an answer to, if I can possibly answer it, I will. So there you go. That's what I got. This has been Aaron. Talk to you again soon.